Well, hello, welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Today we're going to read about Saul's first campaign against the Philistines. We're going to read about how Saul once again doesn't follow God's instructions relayed to him through Samuel. We're going to read how Jonathan becomes the hero of the battle in the face of Saul's timidity. And we're going to hear how an impetuous vow made by Saul leads his men into sin and really cost Israel a chance to thoroughly defeat the Philistines in this initial battle. So as we begin chapter 13, we're told that Saul had assembled a fighting force and he'd split it between himself and Jonathan. Jonathan's men attacked the Philistine outpost. So the Philistines obviously gather people together, really a much superior force, to come out and to crush Saul and Israel. Saul goes to Gilgal to wait instructions from Samuel, actually exactly as Samuel had told him to do years earlier, though he ignored it then. When it appears that Saul is going to lose most of his fighting force because it's taking Samuel so long to arrive, Samuel had said that he would be there within 7 days. They're on the seventh day, Samuel's still not there, so Saul begins to sacrifice himself, fearful that he's going to lose even more soldiers. But as soon as Saul begins, of course, Samuel arrives, and he questions why Saul has not followed God's instructions. Saul tries to justify himself. He blames everyone else with his self-serving, pious-sounding response. But Samuel basically just cuts through all of that, and he simply responds by telling Saul that because of his disobedience, the kingship will not remain in his family. So if you think about this, when Saul first ignored God's instructions through Samuel, his kingship ended up being questioned. Remember that Samuel had told Saul to go to Gilgal, that they were going to, or go to Gibeah, where he was going to drive out an outpost of Philistines. Saul did not end up doing that. When he finally became king, people questioned about, well, who's he? Why should he be king? Obviously, as he had had a great victory under his belt, that would not have happened. So because of this now current disobedience, the kingship isn't going to remain in his family. Indeed, Samuel tells Saul that God has already selected someone after his own heart to be king rather than Saul, whose kingship was actually after the heart of Israel. In other words, Saul was the king that Israel sought. David will be the king that God seeks. Samuel then leaves Saul. He doesn't give Saul any instructions about how to proceed. And Saul's problems are really quite great. He only has 600 men, and he's got to face thousands of Philistines with chariots and everything else. He doesn't have the technical expertise to make swords or other implements of war. Only Saul and Jonathan have swords at this point. And the Philistines are sending out raiding parties that are destroying the land and its crops. So what are you going to do? Well, once again, it's Jonathan that rises to the occasion, takes the initiative. With only his armor bearer, he attacks the Philistine outpost. And through this, God puts the Philistines into a panic. Once he becomes aware of it, Saul presses the attacks, and he makes a foolish oath that anyone who eats before evening that day will be cursed. Now, he probably makes this oath because he wants to keep his men on the move, maximize their advantage and not having stopping, to eat and things like that. But what he really ends up doing is greatly weakening his force and makes it unable for them to press the advantage to the enemy to full advantage because, well, they're hungry. They're weak because of that. And to make matters worse, Jonathan, who quite frankly was busy fighting the Philistines alone when that oath was made, knows nothing about it. So he eats some honey while he's in the forest. And then to cap this all off, the capstone on the problem is that at the end of the day, the troops are famished. So they don't take the time to properly set up some stones to drain the blood from the sheep and the cattle that they're preparing to eat. They just kill them right there on the ground. Well, the blood doesn't properly drain, so they're breaking the command of God that goes all the way back to Noah to not eat an animal with its lifeblood in it. Um, Saul ends up setting up an altar and going around and getting the men to do this properly, but the cat's already out of the bag. Now, Saul wants to press his advantage against the Philistines yet that night, but the priest convince him to ask God first. But when he goes to ask, God doesn't answer, which indicates that something's wrong, that Israel has sinned. For Saul now, the question is who sinned and how did they sin? Had someone eaten during the day against Saul's vow? Was it because the men had begun eating the meat that they didn't have all the blood drained from? Well, they cast a lot using the Urim and the Thummim and the Urim to do this, and the lot falls to Jonathan. When it does, Jonathan readily confesses when Saul asks him, "What did you do?" Saul readily confesses that he ate honey from the forest that day. Well, Saul insists that Jonathan must die, but the troops come to his defense, and they speak a vow that basically puts their lives at risk if anything happens to Jonathan. This apparently ransoms Jonathan from Saul's vow, but the pursuit of the Philistines is at this point ended, at least for now. There's really no ability for Israel at this point to continue pursuing the advantage that they had. Well, now that Saul has finally carried out Samuel's initial instructions of attacking the Philistine outposts at Gibeah, the author considers Saul's ascension to the throne to be complete, and he gives a summary of Saul's conquests against the enemies of Israel. Most notable, though, war with the Philistines is constant throughout Saul's reign. All right. Again, may God be with you and continue to bless you as you continue your readings. I pray that they're helping you to learn and to grow. Look forward to gathering with you yet again tomorrow.